My name is Ethan, and I turned 26 a few weeks ago. I'd love to tell you that it was a day filled with laughter, hugs, and a table stacked with food and gifts. But the truth is, it was the loneliest night of my life. My parents told me they were too tired to celebrate. And instead of a dinner, a cake, or even a card, they ordered takeout for themselves and went to bed before the clock even hit 9. I sat in the living room with the glow of the TV flickering against the walls, a container of cold rice in my hands, and the sound of their bedroom door shutting like the final note in a song I never wanted to hear. At first, I told myself it was fine, that maybe they'd make it up to me tomorrow, or that they just needed rest. But then, hours later, my phone buzzed. My cousin had posted stories on social media, videos of a huge dinner out, balloons tied to chairs, even a birthday cake with sparkling candles. And there they all were, me parents, my brother, my cousins, everyone I grew up with, smiling like it was the happiest night of their lives. Everyone was there except me. I stared at the screen, my thumb frozen above the replay button until the phone slipped out of my hand and hit the couch. It wasn't the first time they had made me feel like an afterthought. Growing up, my brother was always the one who deserved the spotlight. He got the newest clothes, the extra tutoring, the car when he turned 18. When I graduated, they congratulated him for being such a supportive brother. When I landed my first job, they joked about how he had been the real motivator. It was subtle at times, but cutting all the same. I had learned to live with the small jabs, the quiet exclusions, the way my accomplishments were twisted until they seemed like his. But this night, seeing them clapping, cheering, and raising glasses while I sat alone at home broke something in me. I didn't say a word. I didn't comment, didn't call, didn't text. I just let the silence sit heavy in the room. The next morning, the silence shattered with a message from my mom. "We need $2,850 for the mortgage." Just like that. No mention of my birthday, no apology, no acknowledgement that they had left me out. Just a demand, like I was their safety net, like my existence was only useful when it came to solving their financial problems. I stared at that message for a long time. My chest tightened, and I thought about every time I had stepped in to help. The time I covered the electric bill when Dad forgot to pay. The time I lent them money for car repairs, never seeing a cent back. The time I worked double shifts just so they wouldn't lose the house, while my brother blew cash on vacations and new gadgets. Every time, I told myself I was doing it because I cared about my family. But in that moment, with their laughter from last night still echoing in my head, it hit me. I was just their backup plan. I typed out a reply slowly, my fingers trembling, and read it over 3 times before hitting send. "Ask the ones you celebrate." Then I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the table. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. 61 missed calls, messages flooding in. A single text from Dad stopped me cold. "Don't do this." For the first time in my life, I felt the shift of power, like the ground beneath me had changed. All my life, I'd been the one chasing their approval, bending over backward to be included, desperate for scraps of affection. Now it was them scrambling, calling, begging for a response. And me, for once, I wasn't picking up. That was just the beginning. The cracks in the facade of family were only starting to show, and I could already sense the storm that was about to break. The calls didn't stop. By mid-morning, my phone looked like it was under siege. Voicemails stacking up, notifications flashing, each one a reminder of how desperate they suddenly were now that I wasn't available to fix things. Out of morbid curiosity, I finally listened to one of the voicemails. It was my mom's voice, shaky and defensive. "Ethan, honey, I don't know why you're acting this way. Last night wasn't a big deal. You know we love you, but we really need you to send the money right away. The bank is going to start calling if you don't." Her words were careful, almost rehearsed, like she was trying to minimize what had happened. Last night wasn't a big deal. That was her summary of being excluded from my own birthday, while they paraded around town celebrating someone else. I felt my jaw tighten, a coldness seeping into my chest. For once, I didn't let guilt twist her words into excuses. Later that day, I got another notification, this time from my cousin's group chat. They had posted more pictures from the night before. My brother holding the cake, everyone singing around him, balloons spelling out "congrats." My stomach sank as I read the captions. It wasn't even my cousin's birthday they were celebrating. It was my brother's promotion at work, a job he'd only landed because Dad had pulled strings with one of his old friends. They'd chosen that night, my night, to throw him a surprise party, and they hadn't even had the decency to be honest about it. When I didn't respond, my dad tried his turn at guilt. He sent a long text about how family is about sacrifice and how I was being immature for holding grudges over a dinner. I read every word, my chest burning. It wasn't about a dinner. It was about years of being invisible unless they needed me. But the way he framed it, it was as if I was the selfish one for not caving on command. I stayed silent, and that silence drove them wild. By day 3, my brother finally called. I shouldn't have answered, but something in me wanted to hear his voice, to confirm what I already suspected. The moment I picked up, he didn't even say hello. "You're seriously overreacting," he scoffed. "They didn't mean anything by it. Besides, my promotion is huge for this family. Don't make everything about you." I almost laughed at the irony. Not making everything about me. My whole life had been about him. His sports tournaments, his grades, his milestones, his celebrations. And now, when I finally had a day that should have been mine, they had twisted it into his spotlight, too. "I'm not sending the money," I told him flatly. There was a pause, then a sharp laugh. "You're kidding, right? You know they can't cover it without you. Don't be stupid, Ethan. Just do it. That's what you're there for. That's what you're there for." The words cut deeper than I expected. In his voice, there wasn't even a shred of doubt. He genuinely believed my role in the family was to sacrifice quietly so he could shine. I hung up without another word. That evening, another message popped up, this time from my aunt. She'd never reached out to me unless it was for family events. But now she wrote, "Ethan, your parents are older. You need to step up. Stop being difficult. Think of your brother. He has a future to protect, and you can't let money problems drag him down." The manipulation was so blatant, it almost felt like satire. Protect his future. What about mine? What about the nights I worked 2 jobs? The mornings I dragged myself to class with bloodshot eyes? The years I kept the lights on in their house without so much as a thank you? I sat in silence, scrolling through the thread of messages, and it dawned on me. They weren't apologizing because they didn't see anything wrong. They didn't see me as a person to celebrate, just a resource to exploit. My value wasn't in who I was. It was in what I could provide. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing their voices in my head. "You're overreacting. Stop being difficult. That's what you're there for." Over and over, until the words lost meaning and became noise. For the first time, I wondered what life might look like if I stopped answering, stopped paying, stopped being their safety net altogether. The tension was rising, and I could feel something breaking loose inside me, like a rope snapping after being pulled too tight for too long. They didn't know it yet, but my silence wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of something they'd never seen from me before. The breaking point came faster than I expected. About a week after my birthday, when the flood of calls had started to thin out, I got home from work and found my mailbox stuffed with an envelope. No return address, just my name scrolled across the front in my mom's handwriting. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was a letter, an apology, something real. But when I opened it, my hands went cold. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a copy of a withdrawal slip, $2,850. The exact amount they had begged me for, and the account number wasn't theirs. It was mine. I dropped into a chair, staring at the slip until the numbers blurred. I hadn't authorized anything. I pulled up my banking app, my pulse hammering, and there it was. The money was gone. My account had been drained overnight. I scrolled through the transaction details, my chest tightening. The withdrawal hadn't been online. It had been made in person at the branch near their house. The betrayal hit me in waves. Not just that they had taken the money, but that they had planned it. Someone had gotten hold of my account information. And considering I was the only one in the family who kept every detail guarded, the only explanation was that they had gone through my things. My parents had keys to my apartment, just in case of emergencies. I suddenly remembered the few times I'd come home and found something slightly out of place. Mail stacked differently, drawers open that I hadn't touched. I had brushed it off then, but now I knew the truth. They hadn't just abandoned me on my birthday. They had broken into my life, stolen from me, and left me with the proof in black and white. That night, my mom finally called again. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Her voice was chipper, almost relieved. "Ethan, sweetheart, don't worry about the mortgage. We handled it. Everything is fine now." My hand clenched around the phone. "You handled it with my money." There was a pause. Then she sighed, the kind of sigh that always came before a lecture. "It's all the same, Ethan. You know we needed it. Family shares. You'll earn it back. But if the house was gone, where would your brother stay when he comes back from work trips? Where would we all gather? You wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you?" Her tone was calm, almost soothing, like she was reasoning with a child, like I was supposed to nod along and agree that robbing me blind was some noble family act. "I didn't give you permission," I said, my voice low. "You didn't need to," she replied smoothly. "We're your parents. We know what's best." That was it. The line that split everything in two. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as entitlement. My hard work, my sacrifices, my account, it was theirs for the taking because they had decided it should be. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just let her finish, let her hang up, and sat there in silence. As the weight of it all settled in, my parents had crossed a line I couldn't ignore anymore. The years of being overlooked, manipulated, used, they had finally crystallized into something undeniable. I wasn't their son in their eyes. I was their safety net, their ATM, their backup plan. And now they had proven it in the most literal way possible. That night, I pulled out the spare keys they had to my apartment. I stared at the metal glinting in my hand, then dropped them into an envelope and sealed it shut. I wasn't going to let them walk in and out of my life anymore. Not like this. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but for the first time, my anger wasn't drowned out by guilt. It was sharp, focused, and unshakable. And as I sat there replaying my mom's words in my head, "You didn't need to," I realized they had no idea what they just started. The days that followed felt like a fog, the kind that clings to your skin and makes it impossible to breathe. Every time I checked my bank account, the number staring back at me felt like a slap. That money hadn't been extra. It was my safety cushion, my rent, my car payment, the groceries I budgeted so carefully each week. All gone, siphoned off without a word of apology or even the courtesy of asking. I tried to carry on with my routine, but the weight of it hung over me at work. I'd catch myself zoning out in the middle of meetings, my mind replaying the moment I pulled that withdrawal slip from the envelope. My coworkers probably thought I was tired. In reality, I was unraveling. Bills started stacking up faster than I could juggle them. My landlord sent a polite but firm reminder about the upcoming rent. My phone bill loomed. Even putting gas in my car felt like a small defeat. I had always prided myself on being independent, on never asking for help. But now I was on the edge of falling into the very hole I had spent years pulling my parents out of. The worst part wasn't the money, though. It was the silence from them about what they had done. To everyone else in the family, they acted like nothing happened. My aunt called me again, this time to say, "You should be grateful your parents are keeping the house afloat. That home will be yours and your brother's someday." I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Grateful. That was the word she used. As if I should be thanking them for stealing from me. Meanwhile, my brother paraded his promotion like it was some kind of trophy. Photos of his new work laptop, his tailored suits, dinners with colleagues, it all popped up on social media. Each one felt like a reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. The provider, never the celebrated. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself to let it go, to move on. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mom's voice. "You didn't need to. We're your parents. We know what's best." The words festered like a wound that wouldn't close. The breaking point of that low stretch came when I opened my fridge one evening and found it nearly empty. A half carton of milk, some eggs, leftover rice. I sat at the kitchen table with the dim light buzzing overhead, staring at the cracked linoleum floor. I had spent years making sure their table was full, their bills were covered, their comfort guaranteed. And here I was, scraping by, eating cold eggs for dinner. That night, I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't a burst of anger. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of realization that seeps in slowly until it hardens into resolve. If I kept playing this role, nothing would ever change. They would keep taking, keep celebrating without me, keep calling when the mortgage was due. And I would keep suffering, invisible and drained. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, surrounded by overdue bills and half-empty cupboards, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront them yet. I wouldn't shout or fight. That was what they expected. Instead, I would wait, watch, and quietly begin building something they couldn't see coming. For now, I let them think they had won, that I was broken, beaten down, too tired to fight back. But in the back of my mind, the plans were already forming, piece by piece. They didn't know it yet, but I wasn't going to be their safety net much longer. It's strange how rock bottom can make you see things differently. For weeks, I had been drowning in frustration, feeling like I was trapped in the same cycle of giving and being drained. But after that night in my kitchen, the eggs, the empty fridge, the silence, I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I went to work like usual, but instead of dragging my feet, I started looking around with new eyes. I worked in a mid-sized tech company, Nothing glamorous, but steady. Up until then, I had treated it like a stepping stone, a place to collect a paycheck while keeping my head down. That morning, though, I asked myself, what if I leaned in? What if I invested the energy I'd been wasting on saving my family into saving myself? I started staying late, but not out of desperation. I asked questions in meetings, offered solutions, volunteered for projects nobody else wanted. At first, people looked at me like I'd grown a second head. But then something shifted. My manager started giving me more responsibility. Colleagues who barely noticed me before began looping me into conversations. For the first time, I wasn't just a cog. I was someone they counted on. Outside of work, I tightened the reins on my spending. I picked up freelance gigs on weekends, web design, small coding jobs, even tutoring high school students. Every extra dollar went straight into rebuilding what had been stolen. It was exhausting, sure, but it felt different now. Each late night wasn't about patching up my parents' poor decisions. It was about building a foundation for me. And slowly, the tide began to turn. 3 months after my birthday, my boss pulled me aside after a long day. "Ethan," he said, "I've been watching the way you've stepped up. We've got a new role opening on the team, project lead. I think you'd be a good fit." Interested? I tried to play it cool, but inside my chest felt like it was going to burst. I went home that night with an offer letter in my inbox and a salary number that made my jaw drop. It wasn't millions, but it was more than enough to cover my bills, refill my savings, and give me breathing room I hadn't felt in years. At the same time, my side gig started to take off. A website I built for a small local business got noticed, and suddenly, I had more clients than I could handle. Word spread fast, and before long, I was turning people away because I didn't have enough hours in the day. My life, which had felt so suffocating and small, was expanding. Each week, I felt stronger, more capable, more in control. And with that control came a kind of quiet power I'd never experienced before. But the funny thing was, my family didn't notice any of it. To them, I was still the backup, the invisible provider. They still called occasionally, usually with some thinly veiled request. "The car is acting up again," Dad would sigh. "Your brother's planning a trip. Could you spot him a little extra?" Mom would leave voicemails about urgent needs. I listened, but I didn't bite. Not anymore. I gave them polite, empty answers, the kind that bought me time without giving them a cent. And each time I said no or said nothing at all, I felt that power settle deeper in me. The rise wasn't flashy. I didn't suddenly buy a new car or post pictures of vacations. No, my rise was quieter. It was the kind that built brick by brick until one day I looked around and realized I wasn't trapped in their shadow anymore. I had carved out my own life, my own success, and they hadn't even seen it happening. What they didn't know was that this quiet success was setting the stage for something much bigger. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving their neglect. I was preparing. And when the moment came, I'd be ready to turn all of their years of entitlement back on them. It was around 6 months after my birthday that the pieces for something bigger started falling into place. By then, my new position at work had solidified. I wasn't just another employee. I was managing a team, overseeing projects, and even sitting in meetings with senior leadership. My name was being floated around in conversations that used to be far above my head. It was surreal, almost intoxicating to finally be seen. And not for what I could give, but for what I could do. But the real turning point came from an unexpected place: paperwork. One afternoon, I was cleaning out my desk at home when I stumbled on an old accordion folder stuffed with documents my parents had asked me to keep safe. I had forgotten it was even there. Most of it was outdated junk-old insurance statements, warranty papers, even utility bills from years ago. But tucked between the mess, I found something that made me pause: copies of mortgage statements, tax forms, and even a bank loan application with both of their signatures on it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started flipping through the numbers. That's when I realized something that nearly knocked the air out of me. Their financial situation was worse than I ever knew. The mortgage was barely hanging on. They had refinanced multiple times, and they were drowning in credit card debt. There were late fees stacking up like bricks on their backs. And then came the part that made my blood run cold. On one of the loan applications, under assets, they had listed me, my income, my savings, even the money I had once transferred to help them. It was all written down like I was just another one of their possessions. They had claimed me as collateral, in a sense, a guarantee to the bank that they would be fine because I existed. I sat there at my kitchen table, the papers spread out before me, and felt both fury and clarity settle in. To them, I wasn't Ethan. I wasn't a son or a brother or even a person. I was a resource, a number they could write on a form, a lifeline they could tug whenever they started sinking. And yet, hidden in that same paperwork was an opening. In their rush to use me as leverage, they had also exposed everything: their debts, their patterns, their dependencies. I knew more about their financial house of cards than even they probably realized. That knowledge felt powerful, dangerous even. For the first time, I held the blueprint of the empire they pretended to control, and I could see every crack in the foundation. At the same time, my own footing was growing stronger. The side business I had started had taken on a life of its own. I'd registered it officially, opened a separate business account, and even brought on a freelancer to handle overflow work. I wasn't just stable. I was building something independent, untouchable, and entirely mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my parents and brother were still coasting on illusions, still expecting me to swoop in whenever they slipped, I was sitting quietly on information and resources that could shift the entire balance. They thought they had me trapped, but in reality, I had the keys to their undoing. And the best part? They had no idea. I started keeping detailed notes, organizing copies of the documents, building a picture of just how deeply their entitlement had burrowed into their lives. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet, but I knew one thing for certain. When the time came, I wouldn't just walk away. I would make sure they felt, for the first time in their lives, what it was like to be powerless. The opportunity came quietly, almost too easily, like the universe was finally handing me the moment I had been waiting for. It started with another desperate voicemail from my mom, her voice tight and trembling. "Ethan, please call us back. The bank is talking foreclosure if we don't get this payment in by the end of the month. We can't lose the house. Your brother needs somewhere to stay when he comes back. Just help us one more time, please." The irony wasn't lost on me. After everything they had taken, after stealing from me on my own birthday, after mocking my worth with their silence, they still expected me to swoop in like a savior. But this time, I had something they didn't: the blueprint of their entire financial mess, tucked neatly in my possession. Instead of calling back, I made an appointment with the very same bank they had borrowed from. I walked in with their loan papers, the mortgage statements, the tax filings, and calmly laid everything out with the loan officer. To my surprise, he knew exactly who my parents were. "We've been trying to reach them for weeks," he said, flipping through the documents. "They're in serious default." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "I just want to make something very clear. They've been using my name, my income, even my savings on their paperwork without my consent." The loan officer frowned and jotted down notes. "If that's true, you'll want to file a formal dispute. We'll launch an investigation." And just like that, the wheel began to turn. For years, they had leaned on me in the shadows, confident that I would never push back, never expose what they were doing. But now, every false claim, every time they had scribbled my income on a form, was about to be pulled into the light. I didn't have to scream or confront them. All I had to do was let the truth do its work. Meanwhile, I started pulling away every lifeline they still thought they had. I closed the old joint account that my mom had once begged me to keep just in case. I changed the locks on my apartment long ago, but now I went further. I froze access on anything that had even the faintest connection to them. Phone plans, insurance add-ons, all of it. Slowly, brick by brick, I dismantled the tower of dependency they had built on my back. And still, I said nothing. The silence was my sharpest weapon. They called, begged, even tried guilt. My aunt texted me late one night saying, "Do you want your parents to end up on the street? You're being cruel." I stared at the message for a long time before replying with just 3 words, "Not my problem." By then, I knew the bank was circling closer. Notices had been sent, investigations were underway, and the pressure on them was mounting. I could almost picture it. My brother fuming at the idea of losing the house he thought he'd one day inherit. My parents scrambling to come up with explanations. And then the first real crack appeared. A cousin posted a cryptic story on social media, a photo of my parents' house with a realtor's sign staked in the yard. My phone buzzed minutes later with a message from my brother. "What did you do?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The beauty of it all was that I hadn't lifted a finger in anger. I hadn't screamed or stormed out or begged them to see me differently. I had simply stopped being their safety net. And the entire illusion of control they'd built came crashing down on its own. And the best part? They had no one else to blame but themselves. The fallout came faster than even I expected. Within weeks, the bank had confirmed what I already knew. My parents had falsely used my information on multiple loan applications. I didn't need to press charges. The investigation itself was enough. Their lines of credit were frozen, penalties piled up, and the house that had once been their pride and joy was officially scheduled for foreclosure. When the notice went public, the mask they had worn for years cracked. Suddenly, the same relatives who had laughed with them at dinners and praised my brother's every move began whispering behind their backs. I heard through the grapevine that my brother had an explosive meltdown when he realized his inheritance wasn't a mansion waiting in the wings, but a debt-ridden property on the verge of being auctioned. My parents tried one last time to turn it back on me. They showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on the door. I didn't answer, but through the peephole, I saw my dad, red-faced and furious, and my mom in tears. Her voice carried through the door. "Ethan, you've ruined us. How could you betray your own family like this?" The irony of that word betrayerly made me laugh. I thought of my birthday, of the empty fridge, of the withdrawal slip they had left so casually in my mailbox. I thought of every time they had dismissed me, minimized me, used me. And now, standing safely on the other side of a locked door, I finally felt the power balance shift completely. I didn't open the door. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a fight. Instead, I slid a single envelope under the crack. Inside was the spare key they had once demanded I give them for emergencies. A key they had used to steal from me. A key that symbolized the grip they thought they had on my life. Their voices fell silent when they saw it. There was no shouting after that. No pounding, just silence. Weeks later, I drove past the house one last time. The lawn was overgrown. The windows shuttered. The realtor's sign weathered from rain. For a moment, I remembered childhood birthdays, family dinners, laughter that had once filled those walls. But then I remembered the truth. That house had never been a home for me. It had been a stage where I played the role they assigned. Provider, backup, afterthought. Now it was gone. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed with another message from my mom. Just 5 words. "We have nowhere to go." I stared at it for a long time, then locked my phone and set it face down on the seat beside me. For the first time in my life, their problems weren't mine to carry. The finality of that moment washed over me, not with anger, but with calm. They had built their lives on the assumption that I would always bend, always break for them. But I didn't. And in refusing, I had broken the cycle for good. My last thought as I drove away was simple, almost freeing. Let them ask the ones they celebrate.